Take that key off your neck and put it on the table.
Vanessa's voice cut across the donor brunch before I reached the foyer.
I'm sorry? You heard me. That key came from my husband's study. It belongs to me. Of course it does. Empty your bag.
I stepped between them.
No.
Malcolm, stay out of this.
This is my house, too. No one gets searched because you don't like their answer. I knew those eyes.
My mother.
Security. Escort her out. And tell the agency she is never to work here again.
I took one step toward her. She gave me the smallest shake of her head. Vanessa missed it. Miriam Holt, chair of our family foundation, stared at the key. "Where did you get that?" My mother answered softly. "From a room I cleaned a long time ago." Vanessa smiled. "Then you can clean somewhere else." In 48 hours, that board was supposed to give my wife control of the foundation my mother had built. I finally understood why she had come disguised, and why my silence had just become dangerous. Security did not touch her. I need to say that because I have replayed the moment enough times to know how little it would have taken for it to go worse. Two men in gray blazers walked her the length of the foyer, past the champagne table, past the trio playing something soft and forgettable, and out the service door. She went with her chin level and did not look back at me once. The door clicked shut. Behind me, a donor laughed at a joke I had not heard, and the brunch went on, because for almost everyone in that room, nothing had happened. I found Vanessa at the dessert table, thanking a woman for a pledge. "Library," I said. "Now." She excused herself and walked ahead of me, so anyone watching would think it had been her idea. In the library, she folded her arms. "What exactly did that woman do?" I said. "Besides carry a key you thought was yours." "This is not about a key. It is about standards." "Standards?" "There are 70 people in this house who write checks to a foundation with your family's name on it. Somebody's earrings go missing at a brunch, and it does not matter who took them. It matters that it happened here." "Nothing went missing." "Not yet." She smoothed the front of her pale pink dress, and her voice dropped into the calm register she used when she had already decided something. "I am not going to argue about a temp from an agency, and you should hear the rest from me before you hear it from Miriam. The board moved the vote up. Tomorrow evening, at the gala." "That was scheduled for next month." "It was scheduled for whenever the chair could seat a quorum, and she can seat one tomorrow." "Everyone is already flying in." She picked up a folder from the side table and held it out, and I understood it had been waiting there before either of us walked in. Under the foundation seal, it said, in small letters, "Proposed Executive Chair, 5-year term," and under that, her name. Behind the cover page was a program summary, "Service Leadership Residency." The description read well. It always did when she wrote it. Adult scholarship recipients would be placed inside working hospitality environments to build exposure, mentorship, and confidence. Then, in a line I nearly slid past, 4 words: "Required donor-facing service hours." Are they paid for those hours? They receive training, placement access, and stipends. She took the folder back and squared it against her palm. Stop reducing everything to an hourly wage, Malcolm. It is the one thing you never grew out of. In the corridor, I called my mother. It rang until it stopped ringing. I called again. Nothing. Then my phone buzzed against my hand. One line, no greeting. Do not tell Vanessa who I am. Not yet. I did not go back to the brunch. I read that message 4 or 5 times, and each time it said the same thing. My mother was not lost or confused. My mother was working. So my job was not to rescue her. It was to find out what she had come into my house to see before a board of 11 people handed my wife a 5-year term. I went down the back stairs. Briar House is a restoration my own company finished 6 years ago, and I know its bones better than I know most people. What I had stopped knowing was the smell of it. The service corridor smells like bleach and hot linen. When I was a boy, I spent Saturdays following my mother through motel rooms with a pillowcase in my hand, and I hated that smell, because it did not smell like work to me. It smelled like being poor. My father used to catch me holding my breath, and he would say the same thing every time, flat, as if reading it off a sign. There is no clean work and no dirty work. There is only how people treat the person doing it. I had not walked the back of my own house in months. That is not a small thing to admit. The kitchen was full. Trays going out, trays coming back, a young man in a borrowed vest counting champagne flutes twice because he had lost his place. In the staff office, I found Julian Price, our state manager, standing over a clipboard he was not reading. He looked up, and I watched him decide how much of his face to show me. Mr. Reed. Julian, how many foundation trainees are working this weekend? He turned a page. The agency handles temporary staff. The foundation handles its own placements. 2 different lists. Then give me the second list. He set the clipboard down, gently, the way you set down something you may need again. I am not the person to give you that. Julian. He looked at the doorway before he answered, and that told me more than the answer did. There are more of them here, he said, than the payroll shows. I was still standing there with that sentence when my wife's voice came down the corridor. Julian, my office, please. She did not raise her voice. She did not insult him. She stood in the doorway of the little office near the back kitchen and waited until he came, and then until I came too, because she wanted me there. Julian, let us be clear, she said. The household confidentiality agreement covers staffing structure. Discussing staffing with a board member outside official channels is a breach. That is not a threat. It is the document you signed. Vanessa, I said, I own this house. She turned and looked at me with something almost like affection, and that was the worst part. You do, she said, and you authorized me to run this event. She was not wrong. 8 months ago, in a hallway between 2 flights, I had signed a delegation of authority so I would not spend my spring approving seating charts and vendor contracts. I signed because she asked, and because signing was easier than the conversation about why she had asked. I have spent my whole life telling myself that I pick my battles. It took me until my 40s to notice how often the battle I picked was the one that cost me the least. The foundation had taken the morning room for the weekend. Priya Lawson, our program coordinator, sat on the floor with binders spread around her, name tags in one pile and lanyards in another. I sat on the arm of a chair, so I was not standing over her. Priya, are scholarship recipients being required to work donor events? She stopped sorting. Required is a strong word. Then give me a weaker one. 3 of them asked me why the event shifts do not show up on their payroll, she said. Not this weekend. Over the spring, I brought it to Vanessa. And? She told me they are not shifts. She said they are leadership exposure hours. Nobody was stealing anything. I kept waiting for the crime, and the crime never came. What came instead was worse, because it was ordinary. Here is how it worked. A woman leaves a housekeeping job for a supervisor certification, and the foundation pays her tuition and puts her in a mentorship line. Then it asks her to help at a donor dinner. Nobody says she has to, nobody writes it down. But her mentor is at that dinner, and her placement recommendation comes out of that mentor's mouth, and she is not a fool. Voluntary, technically. Voluntary the way a door is unlocked when someone is standing in front of it. I went up to dress for dinner, and that is when Vanessa took her second swing, without an unkind word. She was in the drawing room with one of the foundation's oldest donors. As I passed, she touched his arm and said lightly, with a little sigh of patience, "Malcolm is having second thoughts about professionalizing the foundation. His mother started it around a kitchen table, and part of him wants it to stay there." The old man's eyes came up to me, and I watched a whole story assemble behind them. Jealous husband, sentimental, uncomfortable that his wife had grown larger than the room he built for her. My objective changed on the stairs. Until that moment, I had been investigating my wife. Now I had to protect my own credibility too, because she had just spent 30 seconds making sure anything I said tomorrow would sound like a man defending his pride. I found Priya at the service door with her coat over her arm. "If I can show those hours were not optional," I said, "will you say what you told me in front of the board?" "If you can show it," she said, "not before." I am not standing up in that room on a suspicion and losing everything I have. That was fair. It was also a bill I now had to pay. My mother agreed to meet me at 11 that night, and she chose the place. Not the house. The old workshop on the east side of the river, where I built the company out of one rented bay and a borrowed saw. She came in without the uniform, gray coat, gray hair pinned back the way she has worn it since I was in school. 68 years old, standing in a room full of stripped door frames, looking at a newel post on my bench like she was pricing it. "You still keep the shop cold," she said. "Wood likes it cold." "So does arthritis." She sat on the stool by the bench. It was the first time we had been in a room together in almost 2 years. "Were you testing her?" "At first." "And after that?" She looked at me a long moment, and I understood the answer before she gave it. "Then I started testing you." I had carried anger up from the house all evening. It went out of me like heat out of an open door. "You could have called me," I said. "You could have told me you had concerns, and I would have looked." "Would you?" It was not a question. I got 2 letters this spring, both anonymous, both from adults who came through the program. They said they were put on event shifts and told to call it volunteering, and that saying no would show up later in the recommendation in the placement list. Neither would sign a name. You know why. Because of what happens to people who sign their names. So what was I to do with 2 unsigned letters? Call my son and accuse his wife? I have 1 vote on that board. I gave that money away on purpose so it would never be mine again. She turned the ribbon at her throat. I wanted to watch one event. I did not expect her to hand me the answer in the front hall before the first tray went out. I stepped in front of you. You did. She let that sit. And then you let her throw me out. She put the sentence down between us and left it there, and I sat with the fact that both parts of it were true. You shook your head at me, I said. You asked me for silence. I asked you not to say my name. I did not ask you to let a woman be walked out a service door in front of a room full of people who will never think of her again. She smoothed her coat over her knee. That part you did on your own. You have always been good at doing what somebody asked and calling it respect. I asked to see the key. She lifted the ribbon over her head and put it in my hand. It was lighter than I remembered, the way things from childhood always are. The Palmyra Motel, she said. Off the state road, before they built the bypass. First place I cleaned full time. She tapped the little filed groove in the shoulder of the brass. It hung in the lock. Your father sat on the tailgate with a file for an hour so it would stop catching. He was very proud of that hour. You kept it. When the Palmyra closed, the owner told me to take something from the office, and everybody else took the clock. She almost smiled. Years later, when the business sold and I signed the papers that made the foundation real, that key was in my pocket. I had it in my hand. Miriam was in the room. She asked what it was, and I told her, and she cried, which was not like her. Miriam Holt had not recognized my mother in that foyer. Miriam Holt had recognized the key. I thought you hated Vanessa from the beginning, I said. I did not hate her. I did not know her. She looked at the floor. I never trusted the reports. Placement numbers that only go up. Donations that only go up. I have cleaned enough hotels to know that when every number in a building is beautiful, somebody is not counting something. Then come with me tomorrow. Stand up and say who you are. No. Mom! No. Her hand went flat on the bench. If my name is the only reason they care, nothing has changed. A program built for people nobody looks at gets saved because the founder walked in. And next time, when I am dead and it is somebody else going out that door, there will be no founder. She stood. I will tell that board what happened to me in your front hall, if there is a fair way to say it. I will not lend you my last name so you can win an argument with your wife. I put the key back in her hand, and she put the ribbon over her head, and she left with a cab waiting in the alley. And I stood in the cold shop until my hands hurt. By noon the next day I thought I had it. I have gone back over that morning many times, looking for the moment I should have known better, and I cannot find it. I had 3 things. The payroll for the last 4 donor events showed no wages paid to 11 people whose faces I could match to the foundation's own photographs of those evenings. Priya would confirm on the record that recipients had been told attendance affected placement. And Julian, when I put it to him in the back kitchen with the door shut, told me the staffing rule had not come from the agency or from him. Vanessa had changed it herself in March, verbally, and asked that it not appear on the written schedule. "Will you say that?" I asked him. He was quiet a long time. "If you can put me in a room where it is not only me." 3 adult recipients agreed to come to the gala and answer questions if the board allowed it. Not to accuse anyone, only to describe their own spring. I asked Miriam for 15 minutes before the board seated, and she gave it to me in the library, standing, coat still on. I did not tell her about my mother. That was the arrangement, and I kept it. "Before you vote," I said, "I need you to hear from the people this program is supposed to help." She studied me the way she studies a budget. "Anonymous complaints do not come into my boardroom, Malcolm. They are not anonymous. They will be sitting in your room. Then they will be identified, and their statements authenticated. I will not have a rumor read aloud in front of donors." She pulled her gloves on. "Bring me people who will give their names, and I will give them the floor before the vote." It was enough. I called my mother from the garden. "I think I can do this without using your name." There was a pause, and when she spoke, something in her voice had come loose. "Then do it," she said. It took my wife until 3 that afternoon to take all of it away from me, and she never once looked rattled. Priya called me first. She had been suspended, effective immediately, for mishandling confidential participant information. Her badge was off. Her account was off. She could not pull another record if she wanted to. And now anything she had already told me came out of the mouth of a suspended employee under investigation. "I did not send you a single document," she said, walking fast, frightened. "I answered a question you asked me in my own office." "I know. That is not going to matter." The second call was mine to make, and it went nowhere. The footage from the last 4 donor events lived on a local system in the estate office, and that office had a retention policy with a purge cycle for any recording containing program participants, written into the household privacy schedule to protect them. Vanessa had approved the early purge that morning under her administrative rights. Not a hack, not a shredder in the basement at midnight, a policy applied on schedule by someone with authority to apply it. I had given her that authority. Miriam convened an emergency call at 4. I had asked for it. That was my mistake, and it was a beauty. I laid out what I had left, and I was 2 minutes in when Vanessa said, "Miriam, before we go further, I would like everyone to see something." The document came up with my own name on it. Delegation of authority, executed by me 8 months earlier in a hallway between 2 flights. Full operational control of Foundation events. And in the schedule attached, where I had never once scrolled, a line granting the executive director discretion over all event staffing structures. She did not say I had known what was happening. That is what I still think about. A smaller person would have said it, and it would have been a lie, and a lie I could have fought. She said, "My husband is objecting now to a structure he authorized." There was nothing in that sentence I could take hold of. Julian resigned at 5:30. He found me by the service door with his keys already off the ring. You told me you would say it in a room, I said. I did tell you that. He set the keys on the shelf. My wife works for a vendor, Vanessa Books. My daughter is a year out from tuition. I have watched what happens to the man who becomes the center of a thing like this, and it is never the house that pays. I have a family. I cannot be the center of this. By the time Miriam called the vote on my request, I had a suspended coordinator, a resigned witness, no footage, and my own signature working against me. She was not cruel about it. She was correct, which was worse.
This board will not seat public accusations from a suspended employee and a former employee the day before a scheduled vote, she said. The chair term will be voted as calendared. Mr. Reed, if you develop something that can be authenticated, bring it to me.
8-3. I was one of the 3. I sat in my own library that night with the lights off and looked at the shape of what I had been doing. I had been building a case so airtight that I would never have to stand in front of anyone and say the sentence I did not want to say. I told myself I was gathering proof. What I was doing was arranging things so Vanessa would be exposed and I never would be. Collect enough evidence, quietly, that I never have to admit out loud that I signed the paper that made all of this possible. That is not investigation. That is the same thing I have done my entire adult life, wearing a better coat. My mother had been walked out of my front hall by 2 men in gray blazers, and my first instinct was to fix it quietly, so none of it would land on me. I stopped trying to win the old way at about 2 in the morning. The new objective was not to prove my wife had secretly done something wrong. Almost nothing she had done was secret. It was to make the whole thing visible, protect the people who would speak, and pay my own part of the bill before I asked anyone else to pay theirs. I started calling at 7. The 3 recipients were Denise, Anthony, and Rochelle. I had never spoken to any of them. That alone should have embarrassed me more than it did. I did not ask them to testify against my wife. I said this instead, 3 times, and by the 3rd time my voice was steadier. My name is on the authorization that created the shift structure you have been working under. I signed it without reading it. I'm going to say that out loud tonight, in front of the board and the donors, whether you speak or not. You do not owe me anything. If you want to come and describe your own spring, there will be a chair for you. If you do not, nothing happens to you, and I will put that in writing before you decide. Denise said no. Anthony said he would think about it. Rochelle asked, "Will your wife be in the room?" When I said yes, she was quiet a moment. Then she said, "All right." Then I did the part I could do without anyone's permission. I wrote to Miriam and copied the full board. I asked that a comment period for current participants be added before the chair vote, and then I removed everything that would have let anyone call it a maneuver. I withdrew my vote on the chair term and on anything touching the household contract. I asked that an independent administrator, chosen by the board and not by me, review the program after the gala. And I committed in writing that no participant who spoke would face any consequence from me or from any vendor I control, including the ones who criticized me. I gave up the leverage before I asked anyone for a favor. It was the first honest thing I had done in a week. Vanessa read it within the hour. She found me in the dining room, where the staff were laying the long table, and waited until they carried the last rack out. She was not angry. I had braced for anger. "Do you remember the first donor dinner you took me to?" she said. "A woman handed me her coat. She did not look at my face. She put it over my arm and asked for a glass of white wine. She adjusted a fork by half an inch. I was 29. I had a master's degree. I stood there holding that coat for 4 minutes, deciding whether a scene would embarrass you. I did remember. I remembered laughing about it in the car and telling her people like that were not worth the energy. I had thought I was being generous. I promised myself that night that no one would ever confuse me with the help again, she said. So you built a room where somebody always has to be the help. Her hand stopped on the fork. You are dismantling everything I have built, she said, in front of the only people who can fund it, over a scheduling practice. If it only works when people are afraid to say no, I said. What did you build? She never answered that. Miriam answered at noon with one line. Given the withdrawal of your vote and your consent to independent review, the chair will allow a brief comment period for current participants before the board acts. At 8 that evening, the program cards came back from the printer, and the chair vote had been moved from the end of the gala to the beginning, right after the welcome. She had taken my comment period and put it behind the vote it was supposed to inform. The gala schedule went out to the household at 9 the next morning, and it had one more surprise in it. Access to the dining room during the board session was limited to board members, donors, and approved program representatives. Approved by whom, it did not say. Everyone else, including the residency participants working that night, would be staged in the service wing until dinner began. She had built a room where the people the program existed for could not hear the vote about it. A year earlier, I would have gone looking for her and said something about my house and my name, and she would have smiled and nothing would have changed. I went to the event binder instead. Briar House is a historic property, and everything here runs on an approved occupancy and egress plan that my own firm wrote when we finished the restoration. I know that document the way other men know a lease. The dining room is not the only approved assembly space on it. The garden pavilion is listed as approved overflow meeting space, with its own egress and capacity, signed off for that gala 6 weeks earlier by the same coordinator who worked for my wife. I moved the comment period to the pavilion and sent notice to the board, the donors, and the household at once. It was the first time all week I had used what I know how to do instead of what I own. Vanessa could not overrule it without pulling the pavilion off the plan, and she could not do that on the day of the event without collapsing the approved capacity for the whole gala. She sent back 3 words. Fine, your circus. At 4 that afternoon, Priya walked up my drive in a coat and flat shoes, carrying nothing. I am suspended, she said. I cannot bring records. I cannot speak for the foundation. But no one can stop me standing on a lawn as a private citizen and saying what I heard with my own ears. They will find a way to make you pay for this. Probably. She looked past me at the tents. My grandmother cleaned rooms at the Excelsior for 19 years. I did not take this job for a recommendation. Julian called an hour later. I am not coming back to work, he said. I did not ask you to. I know. I could hear a television behind him and a dog. There is one thing I kept, Mr. Reed. I kept it in March, when I first started sleeping badly.
I kept it because I knew someday somebody would ask me why I left this job, and I did not want the answer to be only my word. What is it? I have to think about my family first, until tonight. He hung up, and I stood there with my ears ringing, because that is what hope feels like when you have stopped trusting it. The last call I made was to my mother. "The comment period is at 7 in the pavilion," I said. "You do not have to come, and if you are coming because you think I need protecting, please do not come at all." "It is not that." "Then why?" "Because I want her to look at the same woman she put out of your house," she said, "before she knows who that woman is. Once my name is in that room, she will start performing. Everyone does. I want the board to see what she does when she thinks it costs her nothing. You are going to wear the uniform." "I am going to wear the uniform." They set the pavilion with the long table under the lanterns and chairs in rows behind it, and by 7:10, there were 60 people on the grass in evening clothes, 11 board members, and Rochelle and Anthony in the second row with their hands in their laps. Vanessa went first because the chair goes first, and she was magnificent. I have never been able to lie about that. She had one board of figures: applications up, completions up, placement rate up. She thanked 3 donors by name. She did not attack me once. Then she set her cards down and said, "I want to address the obvious. My husband and I disagree about the direction of this foundation. That is a private matter, and I am sorry it has become the evening's entertainment. But I would ask this board not to let a marital disagreement derail a program serving working adults tonight in this county." It was the smartest thing said all evening. She had taken every word I was about to say and made it sound like something a husband says. I stood up, and I did not accuse her of anything. "My name is on the authorization she showed the board yesterday," I said. "I signed it. I did not read the schedule attached to it. The staffing discretion that created these shifts exists because I did not do my job on this board, and no vote tonight changes that. That part is mine." I heard the sound a crowd makes when it puts its glasses down. "I have withdrawn my vote on the chair term and the household contract. I have asked for an independent review I do not choose and cannot approve. And I have put in writing that nobody who speaks tonight on any side will face any consequence from me or from any company I control. I am not asking you to trust me. I'm telling you what I have already given up so you do not have to." Rochelle spoke first, hands flat on her knees the whole time. "I was told that missing a donor shift would affect my placement recommendation," she said. "Nobody handed me a paper that said that. I was told." Anthony said, "They called it volunteering. Nobody ever raised their voice at me." He looked at the board and not at Vanessa. "I just did not feel free to say no. There is a difference between being allowed to leave and feeling like you can." Priya stood at the edge of the light, said what she had heard, named the day, and sat. Vanessa answered all of it calmly. "No one was forced," she said. "No one was disciplined. Not one person in this program has ever been removed for missing an event. You may check that." Every word of it was true. That is what coercion looks like when it is done well. It never has to happen twice. I felt the room tilt back toward her.
That was when my mother came up the pavilion steps in the gray uniform and stood at the edge of the light. Vanessa saw her, and something crossed her face that had nothing to do with strategy. Why is she here? Miriam Holt was not looking at the uniform. She was looking at the chipped brass key on the navy ribbon. I already removed this woman from the house, Vanessa said. She does not belong in a board session. My mother said, I have one question. If I had been a donor instead of a cleaner, would you have searched my bag? This is not a courtroom. Vanessa turned to me, and her voice was perfectly level. Malcolm, have her removed. That was the moment. Everything after it happened because of it. Her name is Evelyn Reed, I said. The pavilion went quiet in that particular way where you can hear the lanterns. She is my mother. Nobody gasped. That is not what happens. Two donors in the back row looked at each other. Miriam closed her eyes. Vanessa looked at me, then at the key, then at my mother's face, and I watched her arrive at the answer she had been missing for a day and a half. Then, because she is better at this than anyone I have ever met, she recovered in about 4 seconds. So this was staged, she said. She turned to the board. My husband placed his mother in my staff under a false name on the morning of a donor event. He allowed her to be confronted. He said nothing while she was escorted out. Then he built a case around my reaction. She let her hands fall open. You are not watching an investigation. You are watching a setup. The grass went cold. Laid out in that order, in that voice, it was more believable than the truth. Miriam said, Malcolm. I could have said my mother did all of it alone. It would have been true, and it would have sounded like a man hiding behind his mother. I recognized her before she was escorted out, I said. I did not tell Vanessa. My mother asked me not to. There, Vanessa said. He admits it. I do. And I should have stopped what happened anyway. She asked me not to say her name. She did not ask me to stand there. I looked at the board, and I made myself keep looking. That is the second thing tonight that is mine. Then my mother spoke, and she did not save me. My son did not know I was coming, she said. He did not know until he saw the key. I came because I received 2 letters this spring from adults in this program who were afraid to sign their names. She looked at Miriam, then out at the donors. I am not asking this board to believe me because of who I am. I have one vote here, the same as anyone. Judge the program by what it does to people who cannot write checks. Vanessa did not fold. She picked up the authorization and handed it across to Miriam. Whatever anyone thinks of my tone, she said, the program was approved, in writing, by this board and by my husband. You may censure my manners. You cannot vote away a signature. And she was right. Everything said so far proved she was cold. None of it proved a single hour had ever been mandatory. Julian Price walked out of the dark at the back of the pavilion. He was in a windbreaker, and he stopped short of the lanterns. There's something the authorization does not show, he said. Vanessa said, "You resigned." Yes. He took out his phone. He did not make a speech, and I've always been grateful for that. "This came to me on the 12th of March, he said. I never answered it. I never deleted it. He turned up the volume, and my wife's voice went across that dark garden exactly the way she sounds on the telephone every day of her life. Put the residency group on the donor shifts. If anyone refuses, take them off next month's placement list. Do not put that in the written schedule." Nobody moved. Somewhere past the hedge, a car door shut. Miriam did not make a speech either. "Mr. Price?"
Was that message sent to you directly?
"Yes, ma'am."
Do you still have the original with its date and sender information?
"Yes, ma'am."
Miriam set the authorization face down on the table. "Then the board will not vote on this program tonight." I waited for my wife to say she was sorry. Part of me is still waiting. She stood there in that rose-colored gown with 60 people looking at her and said, "I was protecting standards. Those placements are worth something. People should prove they want them." That was the end of her, and she never heard it happen. 2 board members who had come in supporting her asked for the review to be expanded. A donor stood and went to find his coat. Nobody denounced her. It did not take that. She came around the end of the table to me. Her voice dropped to something only I could hear. "You chose them over your wife." "No," I said. "I chose to stop pretending my silence was loyalty." "Do you want to do this here?" "We will talk after tonight," I said. "Not here." The board met again on Tuesday and did 3 things. It froze the executive chair appointment. It suspended the residency pending independent review, with every participant's tuition and stipend continued during the freeze, which was the only motion I asked for and the only one I would have fought over. And it gave the reviewer 4 years of payroll instead of 1. There were no police and no lawsuit. A woman who had spent a decade making herself impossible to overlook would spend the next year being politely not invited to things, and that was not a lesser punishment. It was the only one that would ever reach her. We talked 3 days later in the stripped dining room. No staff, no donors. She did not apologize, and I had stopped needing her to. "I still believe in standards," she said. "I know you do." "You think that makes me a monster?" "No." I looked at the long, empty table. Standards tell people what work deserves. Character tells us what people deserve. You got very good at one of those, and I let you, because it was easier than saying anything. Then she asked me if I wanted a divorce. "I want distance before I decide anything permanent," I said. She left Briar House that evening with 2 suitcases and the good coat. She did not slam anything, and I did not follow her. My mother came Saturday in her own clothes through the front door because I asked her to. We walked the service corridor the way we used to walk motel hallways. "I am not going to apologize for not saying your name that morning," I said. "You asked me not to, and I would keep that again." "Good." I am apologizing for something else. For 30 years, I believed that as long as I was not the one doing harm, I was clean. I signed her authority. I stopped walking my own back hallways. I heard things and decided they were not my department. I stopped by the service door. I was not innocent.
I was absent. There is a difference, and I did not want to learn it. My mother did not say she forgave me. She has never handed anyone anything they had not finished paying for. She said, "Then do better while it still costs you something." Then she took the ribbon off her neck and put the chipped brass key in my hand. "You want me to keep it?" I said. "No." She closed my fingers over it. "Put it where people will see it." There is a glass case in the front hall with my grandfather's builder's level in it, and for about 10 seconds that is where I thought it was going. Then I understood that a trophy case is only another front hall, and everyone who passes it has already been invited in. I found a small brass hook in the workshop drawer and set it beside the service entrance at eye level, where the staff come in with their trays and their coats and their carts. No plaque, no engraved sentence about dignity. A chipped key on a navy ribbon, hanging where the door is. Monday morning I walked into my own house through that door. The young man who had counted the champagne flutes twice was hanging up his jacket. He moved aside from me automatically, and then he stopped and looked at the key on the wall, and then at me. "Morning," I said. "Morning, Mr. Reed." And we both went in the same way. If you were in my place, would you have revealed the cleaner was your mother the moment you recognized her? Or would you have honored her request and waited? Tell me in the comments.